This is the Cybersecurity Risk Assessment from Team 5 on the United Kingdom. The agenda for this Cybersecurity Risk Assessment will follow the purpose, current measures which include authentication, authorization, and access control, then vulnerabilities and threats, attack vectors, attribution, vulnerability matrix, and recommendations. What is a cybersecurity risk assessment? The purpose of this assessment is to identify, review, address, and reduce threats to the United Kingdom's information system. The goals of the assessment are to review current identity measures, vulnerabilities and threats, analysis of attack vectors and attribution, vulnerability matrix, and recommendations. Current measures. Authentication. Authentication refers to the process of verifying a user's identity, which is typically based on one or more of the following. Knowledge. Something you know, like a PIN or password. Possession. Something you own, like a smart card or an ID badge. Inherence. Something you are, which is physical or behavioral traits. Single-factor authentication refers to using one of the authentication means above for proving identity. Public Key Infrastructure, or PKI, refers to certificates which are registered and signed via a central certificate authority that verifies authenticity. There are multiple methods or models for PKI. The hierarchical model, the bridge model, the mesh model, or the hybrid model. Current measures. Authorization. Authorization is the process of determining what an authenticated user can do. Authorization assists with preventing insider threat or stolen credentials. Means of authorization include access control lists, which will be covered on the next slide, and least privilege. Measures. Access control. Access control is a means to determine and control who has authorization to what and how. There are multiple methods on how permissions are granted. Role-based access control is access is granted based on individual roles. Mandatory access control is access is granted by comparing data sensitivity levels with the user's sensitivity access permissions. Attribute-based access control is access is granted based on assigned attributes. Discretionary access control, access is granted based on the identity and or group membership of the user. There is implicit deny, which is similar to whitelisting, and then implicit allow, which is similar to blacklisting. Attacks on the system can come from multiple vectors, such as hardware, software, operating system, network, human factor, and policies. As you can see it on the slide, there are multiple branches from the top level attack vectors that will be covered in the following slides. But first, we must cover attribution. Attribution helps identify an attacker and their motive. So why would an attacker attack? There are political means, money, and just to cause business disruption. The first attack vector is hardware. Old hardware can induce equipment failure and encryption issues, or they become non-existent. Physical security, such as the lack of storage and locks on servers and systems, can make it easy for theft. No RFID tags on laptops and mobile devices leaving and entering facilities can also assist with theft. The next attack vector is software. Malware, such as viruses, are malicious code or file that can render the system unusable, exfiltrate data, or leave a backdoor for more cyber attacks. Cyber attacks, which include SQL injection. This attack is against a database that can perform functions for the attacker. Cross-site scripting is an attack against web pages that can steal cookies, data, and assist with session hijacking. Buffer overflow is an attack on a software's memory, causing the software to fail and become exploitable. The next attack vector is operating systems, which include system hygiene, removable media, social engineering, and browser updates or extensions. system hygiene such as BIOS issues or patches and updates. A dated BIOS, or one that has been maliciously tampered with, can cause the system to fail or no longer start up. Missing patches and updates can cause an easy exploitation for an attacker since some patches and updates address known vulnerabilities. Removable media presents a quick and convenient means for inducing malware and viruses to the operating system. Social engineering is an attack that steals data and bypasses security measures via phishing. Browser updates or extensions. These provide an easy way for an attacker to exploit since some extensions are third-party or separate from the browser company. Attack vector network. This includes BGP hijacking, DDoS, ports and protocols. BGP hijacking reroutes IPs hitting the gateway router to the attacker's system and directs those IPs to their intended destination. A DDoS attack is a system-wide attack that affects more than one system, rendering them unusable and opening multiple attack vectors. Leaving ports not in use open makes it easy for an attacker to gain unauthorized access to the system since those ports aren't being monitored. Using unsecured ports makes data traversing the network human readable for anyone to see. Attack vector. Human factor. This includes insider threat. Insider threat from a disgruntled employee who is not satisfied with the company and wants to cause intentional harm. Dumpster diving includes if an employee does not properly dispose of business documents, they can be easily recovered when trash leaves the facility. Unintentional insider threat, such as user error or mistakes. This includes an employee can make a mistake or act carelessly, making the system vulnerable, such as spilling water on the system or clicking a bad link. Last attack vector are policies. Policies can be broken into three categories: user, network, and business. A user policy includes password policy and user agreement. Password policy, such that a user not following this policy can make their password easy to break. User agreement policy, users not following the agreement can cause a system outage or unauthorized access. The network policy should be implemented so that networks not in compliance with the policy can leave backdoors open for an attacker or makes vulnerabilities easy to exploit, i.e., ports and protocols. Lastly, business policy, such as an incident response policy. An attacker can exploit the incident response team if they miss a step in recovering or reacting to a threat. In this vulnerability matrix, we can see the frequency of attack vectors on the Five Eyes nations, including the UK, exploits, mitigation strategies, and attack rating. First up, DDoS attacks. DDoS attacks attack targets mostly organization routers and CPU cycles via RAM and filling up pages files on servers to overwhelm routing buffers on interfaces, leading to denying services with IDS or IPS to interrupt the overall applications. Mitigation strategy is to ensure that all systems are having the latest patches and updates on all running applications. Change the timeout option for TCP connections to prevent SYN flood attacks. Utilize the latest antivirus spyware security suite to detect known zombie-type infections. Block ICMP packets at the border since many attacks rely on ICMP. Also, encrypt all data and ensure endpoint security layers, firewalls, and automated patches for operating systems, as well as limiting older operating systems, i.e. devices running on Windows XL or older OS no longer supported. A DDoS attack rating would be high. The next attack is buffer overflow. Buffer overflow may allow remote, arbitrary code execution, which may lead to elevated privileges. Poor programming and programming languages weakness are also the root cause of buffer overflow. Buffer overflow can be mitigated with the validation of all input lengths prior to writing to memory. This can be achieved with the use of library functions for inputs, the use of address space layout randomization, or ASLR, and data execution prevention, DEP, mitigate the risk of buffer overflow attack. The buffer overflow attack rating is medium. Lastly, SQL injection. SQL injection can expose sensitive information stored in an application's database, such as usernames, passwords, names, addresses, phone numbers, and credit card details. The use of prepare statements such as parameterized queries to force the developer to define all SQL code and then pass in each parameter to query later will allow the database to differentiate between code and data despite of what a user input is supplied. This will prevent SQL injection. The SQL injection attack vector, or attack rating, is low. The last set of slides are recommendations. This is the first of 3 slides. Reducing risk to zero is impossible unless you remove the system entirely, i.e., a business can't have a risk if they no longer exist. The recommendations for risk have been broken into 4 categories. Risk avoidance. The next recommendation slide is risk mitigation for hardware, physical lockup of system and hardware. Software, install antivirus and a host-based system. For cyber attacks, sanitize and validate inputs into queries. Network, use IP prefix declarations, and build a robust and redundant system to prevent a DDoS attack. Lastly, policies, perform tabletop exercises of an attack to ensure incident response policy is thorough and robust. Lastly, risk deterrence and risk acceptance. For deterrence, hardware, install camera and fences around a facility to deter theft. Risk acceptance, human factor. Accept that an employee can become disgruntled and build a network to prevent data loss. Also accept that accidents and mistakes happen in the workplace.